Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm super excited to bring you guys episode 5, and we're going to stick on the trend topic of going over the overvalued players in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So today we're going to focus on the running back position and go over some guys that I think you need to be getting off your rosters right this moment. The running back position can kind of be hard to move depending on your league economy, how your league mates and your league values the position. So let's find the best way to move these guys off your roster right this second. Let's get into it. Let's go. All right, guys. So let's get into our first player today. And we're going to talk about James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. He's going about the 505, the middle of the fifth round, and startups about RB14. And yes, one of my main reasons, one of my big issues with James Cook is his price, but it's also some of the underlying metrics that I don't think a lot of people talk about going into 2025. So going back and looking at James Cook's 2024 season, he had a great year. He was efficient he was the running back on one of the best offenses in the NFL. He was second in the league in touchdowns with 18, behind Jahmyr Gibbs, tied with Derrick Henry, who was awesome. Up there with two difference makers at the position last year. And you would think, right, James Cook was probably a difference maker at the position last year. Well, no. He finished outside of the top 10 in fantasy points per game at the running back position with 16.7. That is not good, especially for someone who scored a lot of touchdowns last year, 18 touchdowns. The fact of the matter is Josh Allen's his quarterback, and if Josh Allen vultures a lot of this rushing value, a lot of the rushing touchdowns from the goal line, and James Cook's, touchdown equity goes down at all, that's not good for him at all. And his fantasy points per game can significantly dip because of it. Another thing I want to point out is his snap share. From week 11 to the end of last season, he averaged 41.5% of the snaps and only played above 46% of the snaps once. In weeks 1 through 10, he averaged 54.5% of the snaps, which is it's a 10% difference. That's a significant dip. I don't know what that was because of. I don't know if they just didn't trust him as much, if they wanted to preserve him for the playoffs. But even going into the playoffs, he played the same amount of snaps. It's not like they were preserving him for the playoffs and then, kind of did what Tampa Bay did with Bucky Irving and just let him loose. No, they significantly pushed his snap count back. And if we see a role increase from Ray Davis going into his second year, and if we see Josh Allen vulture this rushing volume, then James Cook is not going to be as valuable in 2025 as he was in 2024. And in 2024, he wasn't as valuable as a lot of people remember. Also, for someone coming out of Georgia who was supposed to be this pass-catching specialist and somebody who was a master out of the backfield, kind of like a DeAndre Swift, well, he only caught 32 passes all of last season, and that was the same as Montgomery and Dobbins, who played 2-3 less games than he did last season. So we have Josh Allen as his quarterback. We have him not catching so many passes because Josh Allen runs the ball so much. And we have him scoring 18 touchdowns last year and not being an outlier at the position. I don't think that's a great outlook for James Cook in 2025. And then you add on the contract dispute that he has going on with the Bills right now. He feels like he should get paid for the amount of production he's had the last couple of years and the great season that he had last year, and props to him. I think he should go get his money. That is not a recipe for a running back you want to be rostering going into 2025 and beyond. So putting all this together, I think that insulating yourself from James Cook, with James Cook, getting him off your roster right now, I think getting a first plus is about the most important thing you can do right now. It's the best thing you can do right now. If you can go cross-positionally and you can go get a Rome Odunze and a Emeka Egbuka, if you can package James Cook and a little piece together and get a Sutton and a McLaurin, do it. Do it now. These are things you need to be doing quickly before the 2025 season hits and people realize that, James Cook's not practicing with the team. He's not showing up. He's got a little bit of a feud with the Bills right now. So I think it's very important to remember, some of these off the field issues can leak into the season, and that's not necessarily good for some of these running backs. Especially running backs, they don't seem to get paid a lot these days, and I'm not really counting on James Cook getting a big contract. He's not an outlier at the position. He's not one of the best running backs in the NFL. He's an efficient one. He's a good one. But if you can move off of him, like again, for some of these guys, and if you can add a piece and go get A.J. Brown, do it right now. Save yourself the headache of rostering some of these guys and struggling to get them off your roster, beginning to the middle of the season when, you kind of have to at that point. All right, let's get into player 2 today. And we're going to talk about David Montgomery, the running back of the Detroit Lions, going at the 807 as the running back 24. Before I say anything as to why you should sell David Montgomery, I'm going to tell you that David Montgomery, man, he is just a good football player. He's not a great player, but man, he's a guy that coaches seem to trust. The Lions love him. The Bears loved him. He does everything you need him to do. But in fantasy, unfortunately, I think the price is far too high. And let me tell you exactly why. Reason number one, he plays probably behind the best running back in the NFL. And this running back is going into year 3, Jahmyr Gibbs. He's awesome. He averaged like 23, 25, however many points per game when Montgomery was out, and showed that he can handle the entire workload. He doesn't need to share touches with anybody. And I think that's going to be a big contributing factor going into 2025, especially with Ben Johnson gone, a new OC coming in. Things are changing in Detroit, and I think it's fair to point out also that Frank Ragnow, the center for the Lions, who has been the leader of that offensive line, is now gone. I think that's a contributing factor because I don't think the offensive line is going to be as good this year, and I think that Montgomery is going to take a hit, especially being just a primary in between the tackles runner, a guy who's kind of a grinder. He's not a high-value touch kind of guy. He's a guy who's going to get some of the goal line carries. I've just saw the last couple of years. He's had a ton of touchdown equity. But I'm worried about Jahmyr Gibbs going into year 3, especially with the new OC. I think if he wants to leave his mark on anything, giving Jahmyr Gibbs an uptick in touches is probably a good idea, especially seeing what he did down the stretch last year. The biggest case against Monty, though, is just where he goes in startups. He's middle of the 8th round, which is kind of crazy considering he's going just in front of Jackson Dart, who was just drafted in the 1st round, especially in Superflex League, just way too high. I mean, you were passing on some really, really, really good values in this range, and some notably as George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk, Jaden Higgins, who was just drafted in the beginning of the 2nd round by the Texans, who could be their wide receiver 2, Devontae Adams and Sutton, who I think are really, really good contending wide receiver pieces, and who are not, unfortunately, overvalued handcuffs. I don't think that Montgomery is going to be as productive as he was the last couple of years. He's had a ton of injuries. He had another injury last year, and it kind of showed afterwards when he came back. He was pretty slow coming back, and his touches went down, his efficiency went down, just about everything went down. And I think guys like James Conner and DeAndre Swift and Aaron Jones, like I just said, are going to give you the same amount of points as a guy like David Montgomery is. And they don't have the best running back in the NFL playing in front of them, taking touches from them in an offense where Ben Johnson's gone now, and I'm a little bit worried about that. Maybe not as much for Gibbs or Amon-Ra, like those guys, but a little bit for David Montgomery and Jameson Williams. So I think that's something to look at going into 2025. And moving on David Montgomery right now is a huge priority for me in all my leagues. I loved having him rostering in the last 2 seasons, especially, they pretty much split the timeshare 50-50 with Gibbs and Montgomery, and I think it's going to change this year, so I'm trying to get him on my roster as soon as possible, and I really think you should too. Now, don't just be getting David Montgomery off your roster for literally anything. If you have to wait for him to have a big week where he falls into the end zone twice. Move him off your roster then if you can't get equal value for him now, okay? If you can move off him for some of these guys like I mentioned earlier, like Ayuk, Luther Burden, Josh Downs, Jaden Higgins, any of these guys who are young receivers who are going to be a little more insulated than David Montgomery, do it now. If you can get multiple seconds for David Montgomery, I would do it. Use that ammunition for later. But don't take value below the market on Montgomery now just because, you're worried about him and you're panicking. Be patient, get equal value for him, but try to get him off your roster as soon as possible, all right? So if we have any Travis Etienne fans watching this right now, I sincerely apologize for what I'm about to do. Travis Etienne going at the 10.05, the running back 30 in startups is, to me, incredibly overvalued. And what a big fall off we've seen from Travis Etienne after, seeing him come out as a 1st-round pick a couple of years ago, was Trevor Lawrence's running back in college, came in as a running back in the NFL. Everyone was so excited. He missed his rookie year, comes out his 2nd year, has a good year, and then the last couple of years, he's averaged 3.7 and 3.8 yards per carry. Incredibly inefficient. He had 0 games over 70 rushing yards last year. Lost significant touches to Tank Bigsby, who was probably the worst player at the position in 2023 as a rookie. And on top of it, he averaged 8.7 points per game. just awful. So hard to see, so hard to watch last season, but sometimes these things happen and they happen pretty quick. We have the new GM and head coach come in. They take Bashal Tutin in the fourth round. I understand it's not day two draft capital, but the GM targeted Bashal Tutin in his interview for the team. It's something I think a lot of people overlook. It's something we talked about in a past video. They love Tutin. They like Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby was probably the only bright spot at that position last year in the backfield. And I don't think that his role is going to significantly dip, especially seeing how bad ETN was last year. Tutin is very similar to ETN, super explosive, fast, pass catching running back, can take the high value touches out of the backfield. And I think, honestly, maybe the beginning of the season, maybe mid-season, I think that Tutin takes that rollover and could possibly take over the entire backfield, but takes ETN's role. And I think we could see ETN have a significant, even more fall from grace as we have already seen so far. Risk is just far too large for me, and if I can get off ETN now, I really want to do it. He's far too risky, and Tutin and Bigsby are just better bets at this point. I understand Bigsby is not going to have the receiving volume that ETN has, but he's probably a safer bet than ETN, who just the coaching staff we don't know how they feel about him. If you can still move ETN for something valuable, it's really important you do it now, especially before training camp happens and we hear more coming out about who is going to lead the backfield, how it's going to split up. And if we hear that it's going to be a three-way committee, Travis Etienne's value is going to dip even more than it already has now. So getting off of him for, like a Kyle Williams, a Jack Besh, if you can get multiple seconds, if you can get a second and a third, I'm willing to do it. I don't know if you are. If you want to wait till the beginning of the season and see if he can maybe get you a good game and then move off of him then do it. Fine. But the risk is too big for me right now. If I can get a second plus a third, like I said, if I can add a piece and go get a, Devontae, a Tyreek, maybe. I don't even know if that's possible. If you can get a Cortland Sutton, I'm trying to do it right this moment. For any value that I can, squeeze out of ETN, I'm trying to do it. If I can get a Jacoby or a Debo or a Ridley who are a little bit cheaper, I am moving him for that price. I'm not thinking twice about it. And if ETN proves me wrong this year, then he proves me wrong. He's going into his fifth year next year. We don't know if they're going to decline or accept his option on his contract. He would be a free agent, lose even more value, and is something I do not want to risk, especially on Dynasty teams where value matters more than anything. So if you're worried about ETN, get him off your roster while you can. I think that you should move him for whatever you can at this moment, but if you want to hold him for the time being and wait for him to have a big game, maybe wait for a small value jump, then do it. Keep that in mind. All the external factors going on, all the factors working against him is something that I really think you should be focusing on. So we're going to talk about Mr. Zach Charbonnet, running back for the Seattle Seahawks, going off the board at the 10-11 as the running back 32 in startups right now. He's keep trade cuts running back 26, which doesn't make any sense to me. And like I just stated, this price confuses me. I mean, why is a handcuff going this high? Why is a handcuff value this high? The Seahawks have told us exactly who Charbonnet is going to be on this team the last two seasons. He is Kenneth Walker's backup. He is the guy who is going to come on the field when Kenneth Walker needs a break. He's a guy who's going to fill in as the full-time starter, yes, when Kenneth Walker's hurt, which has been a little bit more than we have liked to see the last 2 seasons or so. And he has looked great when Kenneth Walker's off the field. But I'm not spending a 10th round pick on a guy whose only path to production is if the starter gets hurt. I mean, realistically, what's the difference between Charbonnet and guys like Ray Davis, Tyler Algier, Jalen Wright, who honestly are all in better offenses and are just the handcuffs to the starter on their own teams? I think Charbonnet can be a great asset down the line if we see Kenneth Walker go out the door and find a new team. But until then, he is what he is. He's a handcuff. He's a guy who was drafted in the second round, who we all loved that draft class, who honestly was, I think, my running back 2 or 3. But he's blocked by Kenneth Walker at the moment, and we have to wait a year or two to figure out if he's even going to have a bigger role on this team. And if Kenneth Walker signs an extension, then he's going down the drain at that point until maybe he hits free agency. And then we don't even know if he's going to have a role because he's been a backup his entire career. If you can take advantage of this value that he has right now and move off of him for, a guy like Downs, if you have to add an extra piece, if you can go get a Jacoby Myers who just averaged 14.5 fantasy points per game at the wide receiver position, who has Geno at the helm now, please go do it. If I'm rebuilding, I would rather have a younger wideout who I am not going to have to worry about if the running back in front of him gets hurt, or if the running back in front of him is going to leave in free agency. I don't want to bank on that type of risk. And whose best possible outcome is if the guy in front of him moves on or gets hurt. It's not a good idea to hold this type of value on your dynasty team. And honestly, I'm only rostering Charbonnet if I have Kenneth Walker. And let's think about this as well. If you can go get a Brandon Ayuk, if you can go get a Luther Burden, if you can go get a Shakir, please go do it. Charbonnet is valued way too high at this point. An 11th round pick, end of the 10th round pick in startups is far too high for anybody. I don't care what your outlook looks like. If you're competing, rebuilding, whatever, get him off your roster right now, especially if you don't need him and you don't have Kenneth Walker. Take advantage of these types of things because it can be the difference between, having a high value player in your flex and just holding on to a backup running back who may or may not even score many points at all this season. All right, guys, so that is going to be all for me today. But tell me, are you selling some of these guys like I am? Are you holding them? Are you hoping for bounce backs in 2025? If you are, be smart about it. And if you're in the trenches like I am, keep building value now. The 2025 season is about a month and a half, 2 months away. We're coming up closer day by day. So stay at it. Keep building value like I said, and I'll see you here soon. Later, guys.